Unaware he was walking straight into her trap, Ethan secretly arranged their divorce and planned to drain $500 million from their joint account to marry his mistress, believing his wife, Clara, was too blinded by love to ever notice. But Clara had seen the betrayal long before he made his first move. Behind her calm smile, she'd already set a plan in motion, one that would turn his secret scheme into his ultimate downfall. She played the devoted wife by day, but by night, every document he forged, every transfer he hid, and every lie he whispered to his mistress, she was already 10 steps ahead, watching. But how did Clara discover his plan before he even filed the papers? What did she do that shattered him so completely he never recovered? And when the $500 million vanished overnight, who truly owned it in the end? The first signs came quietly, like soft cracks forming under polished marble. The mornings that once began with laughter and gentle kisses turned cold, mechanical. Ava, that was her real name, though Ethan always called her Clara in his phone to disguise her from the woman he was seeing, noticed the change before she could admit it aloud. He used to brew her coffee just the way she liked it, 2 sugars, oat milk, and a touch of cinnamon. Now, he barely looked at her while scrolling through his phone, his screen lighting up with messages he claimed were from work. She would smile, brush her hair aside, and pretend not to notice the distance. But every movement, every flicker of his expression told a story. She wasn't the naive woman he thought she was. She was a strategist, quiet but deliberate. Still, Ava's mornings began to fill with dread. The way he locked his phone, the way his business trips grew longer, the subtle guilt in his smile when their daughter, Lily, ran to hug him. And then, one night, when the silence became unbearable, she reached for his phone after he fell asleep. Her hands trembled, heart racing, torn between trust and suspicion. What she found froze her blood. Messages from a divorce attorney discussing division of assets, properties, and offshore transfers. Her name in bold. The tone clinical, ruthless. There were mentions of minimizing exposure and keeping her unaware. Ethan's reply was calm, confident. She won't see it coming. I've already started moving funds. Ava pressed her hand over her mouth to stifle the sob that rose up. It wasn't just betrayal, it was annihilation disguised as love. By dawn, she had decided not to confront him. That would be too easy, too loud. Instead, she called her best friend, Lauren, her voice steady but hollow. Lauren wanted her to expose him, but Ava knew better. If Ethan was planning this, he was already several moves ahead. She needed someone smarter, someone who understood how men like Ethan thought. That's when she thought of Daniel, Ethan's old college friend, who'd gone into finance and had once warned her half-jokingly, never let Ethan near your passwords. She met Daniel at a quiet cafe the next afternoon. The hum of espresso machines and low chatter couldn't drown out the weight of her words. When she told him what she'd discovered, Daniel leaned back, exhaled sharply, and muttered, "He's playing a dangerous game, Ava. If he's already moving money, you need to stay still. Pretend nothing's wrong. Don't tip your hand." It was the hardest advice she'd ever had to follow. That night, she cooked Ethan's favorite meal, roasted salmon with lemon butter and thyme, and laughed at his jokes like nothing had changed. Her smile was a mask of grace over a heart burning with strategy. Over the next week, Daniel began quietly tracing financial movements connected to Ethan's name. He taught Ava how to monitor patterns without alerting him, small withdrawals here, coded transfers to new shell companies there. Every number told a secret Ethan didn't know she could read. Then, one Thursday night, Daniel called with urgency in his voice. "Ava, he's meeting someone tomorrow. Avalon Hotel, Suite 806. It's not just business." Ava didn't sleep. She spent hours rehearsing what she'd say if caught, what she'd do if things spiraled. By morning, she put on her calmest expression, kissed Ethan goodbye as he lied about another investor meeting, and followed him from a distance. She watched from the shadows of the hotel corridor as he stepped into the suite, his lawyer already inside. She recorded every word. Ethan's voice smug, certain. She's clueless. By the time she realizes what happened, I'll have everything. The house, the accounts, even Lily. Madison and I will be free. Madison! The name fell like poison on her heart. His mistress, the woman who had whispered ambition into his betrayal. Ava left before tears could betray her resolve. The footage she carried was enough to end him, but she wasn't ready. Yet, not until every thread of his deceit was pulled apart, and every asset he tried to steal was sealed under her name. When she got home, Ethan greeted her with a kiss on the cheek, still playing the loving husband, and Ava, her face serene, her eyes unreadable, kissed him back, because the game had only just begun. That night Ava sat by the dim light of her study lamp, the glow of her laptop painting shadows across her face. She replayed the recording from the Avalon Hotel, Ethan's laughter echoing through the speakers like a blade turning in her chest. Every word, every smirk, every mention of Madison carved something new inside her. The pain was unbearable, but behind the ache, something colder, sharper was taking shape. Daniel's message blinked on her screen. "We have to move fast before he transfers the rest. I know a lawyer who can protect you." Ava hesitated for a long time before replying. She had always believed in handling things quietly, in keeping the peace no matter the storm. But this wasn't a storm anymore, it was a demolition, and Ethan was holding the detonator. Daniel arranged a meeting for her with Julia Grant, a divorce attorney known for her precision and zero tolerance for manipulation. When Ava walked into Julia's sleek downtown office, the lawyer studied her not as a victim, but as a strategist waiting to move her first piece. "Your husband thinks you're naive," Julia said after reviewing the recording. "That's good. Let him. It's the most powerful disguise you have." Ava's lips trembled into something close to a smile. "He believes he's 10 steps ahead. Then we'll make him believe that right until he falls." The three of them, Ava, Daniel, and Julia, became a quiet alliance. Daniel set digital alerts to track withdrawals and movement from their joint accounts, feeding information to Julia, who started building an airtight case. Ava played her role perfectly at home, serving dinner, laughing on cue, making love when he demanded it. Every gesture calculated to keep him blind. Yet each performance took a toll. Some nights after Ethan fell asleep, she'd slip into the bathroom and cry into a towel to keep from making noise. She'd look at herself in the mirror and whisper, "Hold your ground." She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for Lily's future, for the years she'd sacrificed believing in a love that had long since died. 2 weeks passed, and Daniel uncovered a hidden pattern. Ethan had been moving small portions of money through crypto exchanges and a false corporation registered under Madison's cousin's name. It was clever, but not clever enough. Julia filed silent motions to flag the accounts, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Still, the facade at home grew more fragile. Ethan's arrogance had bloomed since his affair began. He walked with the air of a man who thought he had already won. At dinner, he would speak about trust and partnership, irony dripping from every word. Ava watched him, listening carefully, noticing the tremors in his hand when his phone buzzed, tiny details revealing cracks in his calm. One evening, as they hosted a dinner for his business partners, Madison called him mid-toast. He silenced his phone too quickly, his eyes flickering just once toward the hallway. Ava smiled through the pain, clinking glasses with the guests, her laughter masking her fury. But inside, she memorized that reaction. The way his pupils shrank, the way he swallowed hard before pretending nothing had happened. Later, when the guests left and he dozed off in the living room, Ava unlocked his phone using the fingerprint sensor he'd once drunkenly shown her. There it was again, Madison Cole. Messages filled the thread, plans of moving abroad, mocking her intelligence, celebrating how easy she was to deceive. Ava closed the phone and walked to Lily's room. She stood over her daughter's sleeping form, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "You'll never lose what's yours," she whispered. "I promise." The next morning, Julia called with news. "We're ready to move. The accounts are in position. One more large transfer and we can freeze everything. If we act now, he won't see it until it's too late." But Ava wanted more than victory, she wanted truth. She wanted Ethan to know that every step he'd taken toward betrayal, had been watched, measured, and answered. Not yet, she said. He has to believe he's still in control. That afternoon, she followed Ethan again. This time, he met Madison not in a hotel, but in a luxury car parked near the marina. She stayed hidden behind a tinted cafe window as they laughed and kissed, their hands entwined over a folder of documents, property papers, trust accounts, the pieces of her life he planned to erase. Ava pressed record once more. She caught everything, the laughter, the arrogance, the words that sealed their fate. When she returned home, Daniel was waiting. You have enough to destroy him, he said quietly. Are you sure you're ready for what comes next? Ava turned to face him, her eyes calm, resolute. He tried to erase me, Daniel. I'm just rewriting the ending. That night, she slipped into bed beside Ethan. He wrapped an arm around her waist, murmuring her name like a man who still believed in his performance. Ava stared into the dark, her heart silent but steady, knowing that in less than 72 hours, the empire he'd built on lies would belong to her. And when she finally drifted to sleep, she dreamed not of revenge, but of freedom. The next morning, sunlight poured through the kitchen windows, but warmth no longer lived in that home. The house felt like a stage, every smile rehearsed, every silence loaded. Ethan hummed while tying his tie, the same man who once looked at her with devotion now completely consumed by his reflection in the mirror. Ava watched from across the room, noting every smug detail, the expensive watch, the new cologne she hadn't bought, the faint red lipstick stain on his cuff. He leaned down to kiss her cheek. I'll be late tonight, another investor meeting. Ava smiled faintly. Of course, I'll keep dinner warm. She waited until the sound of his car disappeared down the driveway before calling Julia. It's time. Julia's voice was steady, sharp. Then this is it. Once we act, everything moves fast. There's no going back. Perfect, Ava whispered. By noon, Julia's team began executing the plan they'd prepared for weeks. Quietly, methodically, they filed court orders to freeze all joint and offshore accounts, flagging Ethan's transfers as fraudulent. Daniel's software triggered alerts that spread across Ethan's banking networks, causing delays, reversals, and internal investigations. Within hours, Ethan's empire began to crack, not publicly yet, but beneath the surface where panic first blooms. Ava carried on as though nothing had changed. She picked Lily up from school, took her for ice cream, read her a bedtime story. Every simple act felt like reclaiming a world Ethan had tried to take from her. She tucked Lily in, kissed her forehead, then sat by the window waiting. When Ethan finally came home that night, his face was pale, his composure frayed. He dropped his phone on the counter with trembling hands. Did you use the accounts today? He demanded. Ava blinked slowly. No. Why? They're frozen, every one of them. The transfers, everything's locked. My attorney's not answering my calls. His voice shook with fury and confusion. Something's wrong. Ava stepped closer, her expression soft, unreadable. Maybe the bank is just protecting our assets, from theft. The irony cut through the air like a blade, but he didn't see it. He stormed into his office, slamming drawers, cursing under his breath. Ava followed quietly, her hand brushing the edge of the folder hidden beneath a stack of papers, the same folder that would end this charade once and for all. The next day, Ethan met with his lawyer again, desperate. But Julia had already reached him first. Legal motions hit like dominoes, petitions, injunctions, asset freezes, subpoenas. Every route he'd planned to escape was sealed before he could even react. At the same time, Ava and Daniel pushed the next part of their plan. They leaked select financial documents, evidence of fraudulent transfers, to an investigative reporter Daniel trusted. Within 24 hours, whispers began circulating in business circles. By day 2, headlines exploded across digital media. Tech investor Ethan Cole under investigation for asset mismanagement and fraudulent transfers. Madison called him in a panic, her name flashing across his phone in the middle of dinner. Ava sat across from him, stirring her soup, pretending not to notice. he answered, his voice low and frantic. Don't call me right now, everything's falling apart. Ava's spoon clinked softly against her bowl, her face serene. Later that night, when he stepped outside to shout into the phone, she listened from the doorway. You promised me everything, Ethan, Madison cried through the speaker. You said the money was safe. Now they're investigating me too. What did you do? I don't know. Ethan's voice cracked. The accounts, someone froze them. Julia won't answer. The firm's ignoring me. Julia, Ava whispered under her breath, almost smiling. When he came back inside, she was waiting in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, calm and graceful like a woman hosting her own storm. Rough night? She asked softly. Ethan glared, suspicion flashing in his eyes. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Watching? Ava tilted her head. Why would I enjoy that? You're my husband. He stared at her, trying to read her tone, but she'd become unreadable, a mirror reflecting only what he projected. I built everything for us. He lied. She didn't flinch. Then why were you planning to take it all for yourself? The words hung in the air like gunfire. Ethan froze, the color draining from his face. What are you talking about? Ava reached behind her and placed the folder on the table. Inside were printed transcripts of his messages, copies of bank transfers, and photographs of him with Madison. You wanted a divorce, Ethan. You wanted to take Lily, the house, the money, all of it. But you forgot one thing. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. I don't lose quietly. He opened the folder with shaking hands. His eyes moved from the documents to the voice transcript from the hotel, his own voice echoing through the printed lines. She's clueless. By the time she realizes what happened, I'll have everything. When he looked up, Ava's gaze met his with unshakable calm. I realize, she said. And now, I have everything. He slammed the folder shut, rage twisting his face. You'll regret this. Maybe, she said softly, but not as much as you will. That night, Ethan left the house with nothing but his phone and his keys. His empire was collapsing, his mistress had cut ties, and his name was trending for all the wrong reasons. Ava stood by the window as his car disappeared down the street, her reflection faint against the glass. For the first time in months, she breathed freely. But it wasn't over yet. Tomorrow the courts would make it official. The morning of the court hearing dawned gray and windless, as though the city itself was holding its breath. Ava stood before her mirror, buttoning the sleeves of her navy suit with slow, deliberate precision. Every thread, every line of fabric felt like armor. Behind her, Lily's laughter echoed faintly from the living room as Lauren kept her entertained, shielding her from the chaos beyond the door. Ava glanced at the clock, 8:47 a.m. She picked up her bag and the thick folder that had become her weapon of truth. Inside were the recordings, the financial statements, the court filings Julia had prepared with surgical perfection. Her heart beat steadily, not from fear but from clarity. The woman staring back in the mirror wasn't the same one who'd once cried into a towel to hide her pain. This was the Ava Ethan had underestimated, steady, sharp, unbreakable. When she arrived at the courthouse, the air buzzed with tension. Paparazzi swarmed outside, snapping photos as reporters shouted questions about Ethan Cole's financial scandal and infidelity leaks. Julia met her at the entrance, calm and collected, her briefcase in hand. He's already inside, Julia murmured. Looks like. Madison didn't show. His attorney tried to delay, but the judge denied it. Ava nodded once, her jaw tightening. Then let's finish this. Inside the courtroom, Ethan sat stiffly at the defendant's table. His once flawless suit looked wrinkled, his eyes hollow from sleepless nights. The arrogance that once dripped from him had curdled into desperation. He didn't even look at her when she entered. He only stared at the judge, gripping his pen like it could hold his collapsing world together. The proceedings began quietly but swiftly. Julia's presentation was methodical, a symphony of evidence and precision. Every bank transfer, every forged signature, every whispered confession from that hotel recording played through the courtroom speakers. Gasps rippled through the crowd when Ethan's voice filled the air. She's clueless. By the time she realizes what happened, I'll have everything." Ethan's lawyer tried to object, but the judge silenced him with a quote, "Wave. Sit down, counsel. Let her continue." By the time Julia finished, the silence was heavy. Ethan looked up at Ava for the first time, his face a ruin of disbelief. "You did this to me?" he whispered. Ava's voice was calm. "No, Ethan, you did this to yourself. I just stopped you." The judge's verdict came swiftly. Joint accounts transferred under Ava's legal control, fraudulent transfers reversed, full custody of Lily granted to her, and Ethan ordered to pay damages and legal fees. But the greatest blow wasn't in the numbers, it was in the headlines that followed. By that afternoon, the Wall Street Ledger ran the story. Ethan Cole's financial empire collapses amid fraud and infidelity scandal. His investors pulled out, his reputation turned to ash. Madison, desperate to save herself, leaked her own statements to the press, messages, receipts, and photographs exposing Ethan's deceit. Her betrayal of him was swift and merciless. Ava watched it, all unfold from the safety of her home, sitting by the window as the news played quietly on the television. She didn't gloat. She didn't smile. Victory wasn't loud, it was silent, steady, and final. That evening, Daniel stopped by, carrying a small envelope. "Everything's been finalized," he said softly. "The $400 million you saved, it's all been moved into Lily's irrevocable trust. Ethan can't touch a cent of it." Ava exhaled slowly, a breath that seemed to release months of hidden pain. "Thank you, Daniel, for everything." He smiled faintly. "You did the hard part. I just followed your lead." After he left, Ava walked down the hall to Lily's room. The little girl was coloring by her bed, sunlight spilling across her hair. "Mommy, are we still going to the lake this weekend?" she asked, eyes bright. Ava knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Yes, sweetheart, we can go anywhere now." Lily smiled, oblivious to the foam storm her mother had weathered. "Can Daddy come too?" she asked innocently. Ava's throat tightened, but she smiled gently. "Not this time, baby. Daddy has some things to fix first." That night, after Lily fell asleep, Ava sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea. The same kitchen where Ethan had once kissed her goodbye, where lies had lived in the air like perfume. The silence now felt different, peaceful, clean. She took out one final document from her folder, the official divorce decree, stamped and signed. The name Ava Cole stared back at her, but she smiled faintly and drew a pen across it. Beneath it, she wrote her maiden name, Ava Morgan. Freedom felt like oxygen after a lifetime underwater. Across the city, Ethan sat alone in a cheap hotel room, scrolling through news articles that dissected his downfall. His phone buzzed with missed calls, debt collectors, former friends turning away. He looked at his reflection in the dark window, unshaven, broken, stripped of everything, and whispered her name like a curse and a confession. Ava. But Ava wasn't thinking of him anymore. She was thinking of Lily's laughter, the new home she'd found on the coast, and the sunrise waiting beyond the storm. As dawn approached, she stepped outside onto the balcony, the cool wind brushing her skin. The city below was waking up, unaware of the quiet victory that had just rewritten her life. She sipped her tea, her voice barely above a whisper. "You thought I wouldn't see it coming, but I was always 10 steps ahead." The sun broke over the horizon, gilding her in light. And for the first time in years, Ava smiled, not because she'd won, but because she was free. Ava sat on the balcony long after the sun had risen, the warmth touching her face as though the universe itself was blessing her quiet victory. The city shimmered beneath her, unaware that somewhere high above its streets, a woman who had once been broken was now whole again. Inside, Lily's soft laughter echoed through the house as she chased sunlight across the living room floor, her small feet padding over the hardwood. That sound, the pure, innocent music of her daughter, was everything Ava had fought for. It was the sound of freedom, of safety, of a future untainted by deceit. She closed her eyes and thought of the woman she'd been just months ago, the wife who ignored the distance, who justified every lie, who believed that silence would save her marriage. That version of herself was gone now. Pain had burned her hollow, but truth had rebuilt her stronger. Ethan had taught her how dangerous trust could be, but he had also taught her how powerful silence was when wielded with purpose. Her phone buzzed once on the table beside her. It was a message from Julia. Case officially closed. Congratulations, Ava. You've secured everything for Lily. Take some time for yourself now. You've earned it. Ava smiled faintly. Thank you, Julia, for helping me turn survival into strategy. She set the phone down and looked toward the horizon. The ocean glimmered in the distance, its surface catching the morning light just as she used to catch Ethan's lies, calm on the outside, with power beneath. Lauren called later that morning, her voice bright. I saw the news. Everyone's talking about him. You okay? I'm better than okay, Ava said softly. I'm done living in the shadow of someone else's story. You always were the smart one, Lauren said. He just didn't see it until it was too late. When the call ended, Ava took Lily's hand, and the two of them stepped outside. The air smelled of jasmine and rain, fresh and new. They walked to the small garden behind the house, where Lily knelt beside a patch of soil they'd planted together weeks before, tiny flowers just beginning to bloom. Look, Mommy, Lily said excitedly, pointing. They're growing. Ava crouched beside her, her heart swelling. Yes, baby, they are. Sometimes things have to break open before they can grow. Lily looked up, confused, but smiled anyway, holding her mother's hand. Ava kissed the top of her head, holding her close. In that simple moment, surrounded by sunlight and silence, Ava understood the fullness of her victory. It wasn't the frozen accounts or the courtroom triumph that defined it, it was this: peace. The knowledge that Lily's world would never again be ruled by lies, that every dollar Ethan had tried to steal now belonged to her child's future, that the woman he had underestimated was the one who had quietly rewritten his fate. Later that evening, Ava stood by the balcony once more. The city lights shimmered like constellations, and the ocean whispered far away. She thought of Ethan not with hate, but with a strange, calm detachment. She imagined him sitting in that dim hotel room, clutching the ruins of his empire, realizing that every step he'd taken toward betrayal had been a step deeper into her plan. Unaware she was 10 steps ahead, she murmured, repeating the words that had once been her private mantra. She traced the edge of her teacup, her mind drifting through memories, the first lie, the first doubt, the first moment she'd realized she had to fight differently. She had turned heartbreak into strategy, pain into armor, silence into her sharpest weapon. Now, there was nothing left to fight for, only to live. As Lily called her from inside, Ava turned away from the fading skyline. Coming, sweetheart. She took one last look at the world outside, the same world that had once watched her break, and smiled. Not out of triumph, but out of peace. Because true victory wasn't about revenge, it was about freedom. And Ava Morgan, the woman no one saw coming, had finally found hers.